In the summer of 1992, I bought a plane ticket to Paris, purchased an old Renault, and drove with a friend to Kiev over hundreds of miles of bad Soviet roads. We had to stop often. The tires blew on the jagged pavement. There was no gas available, and curious peasants and truckers wanted to look under the hood to see a Western automobile engine. On the single highway stretching from Lviv to Kiev, we visited the town of Zhytomyr, a center of Jewish life in the former Pale of Settlement, which during the Second World War had become the headquarters of Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust. Down the road to the south, in Vinica, was Adolf Hitler's werewolf compound. The entire region was once a Nazi playground in all its horror. Seeking to build an empire to last 1,000 years, Hitler arrived in this fertile area of Ukraine, the coveted breadbasket of Europe, with legions of developers, administrators, security officials, racial scientists, and engineers who were tasked with colonizing and exploiting the region. The Germans blitzkrieged eastward in 1941, ravaged the conquered territory, and evacuated westward in defeat in 1943 and 44. As the Red Army reoccupied the area, Soviet officials seized countless pages of official German reports, files of photographs and newspapers, and boxes of film reels. They deposited this war booty and classified the trophy documents in state and regional archives that would remain behind the Iron Curtain for decades. It was this material that I had come to Ukraine to read. In the archives in Zhytomyr, I discovered pages with footprints and charred edges. The documents had survived 2 assaults, a Nazi scorched earth evacuation that included the burning of incriminating evidence and the destruction of the city during the fighting. The files contained broken chains of correspondence, tattered scraps of paper with fading ink, decrees with pompous, illegible signatures left by petty Nazi officials, and police interrogation reports with the shaky scrawls of terrified Ukrainian peasants. I had seen many Nazi documents before, while comfortably ensconced in the microfilm reading room of the U.S. National Archives in Washington, D.C. But now, seated in the buildings that had been occupied by the Germans, I discovered something besides the rawness of the material I was sifting through. To my surprise, I found the names of young German women who were active in the region as Hitler's empire builders. Researching post-war investigative records, I realized that hundreds of women had been called to testify as witnesses, and that many were very forthcoming. One former kindergarten teacher in Ukraine mentioned that Jewish thing during the war. She and her female colleagues had been briefed as they crossed the border from Germany into the eastern occupied zones in 1942. She remembered that a Nazi official in a gold-brownish uniform had reassured them that they should not be afraid when they heard gunfire. It was just that a few Jews were being shot. If the shooting of Jews was considered no cause for alarm during the war, then how did women respond when they actually arrived at their posts? Did they turn away, or did they want to see or do more? Hitler's Furies is based on extensive research in which I came to the conclusion that about 500,000 ordinary German women were mobilized for the war in the East. 500,000 that I call the lost generation of First World War baby boomers that consisted of teachers and nurses and secretaries and wives and mistresses. Within this mobilized mass, certain women stand out. Multitasking secretaries were both desk murderers and sadists. Some not only typed up liquidation orders, but also participated in ghetto massacres and attended mass shootings. Wives and lovers of SS men not only consoled their mates when they returned from the dirty work, but in some cases also bloodied their own hands. In Nazi thinking, rounding up and shooting Jews for several hours was hard labor, so female consolation extended beyond creating a moral sanctuary at home. Women set up refreshment tables with food and drink for their men near mass execution and deportation sites. The entanglement of sexual intimacy and violence was evident as I read the files, but in ways that were more mundane than scenes depicted in vulgar post-war pornography. Romantic outings such as a walk in the woods might bring lovers into visceral contact with the Holocaust. I read about a German commissioner and his lover's secretary in Belarus who organized a winter wartime hunt. They failed to find animals, so they shot at Jewish targets who moved slowly in the snow. In many ways, Hitler's Furies is about how we fail to reckon with the past, not so much as a historical reconstruction or morality tale, but as evidence of a recurring problem, genocide, in which we all share responsibility. Thank you.